All right, all right. Happy Friday to all you devils out there. Sam here with you, 19th of November, and it's a little after 1 o'clock. I know I'm a little behind schedule. Well, two things. When I was going through a lot of different scenarios here because it's very open to interpretation. And I'll confess it, I was trading the stock indexes and having a good day here, so I didn't want to stop. Not that I mind, but so here we go. Now, I'm going to start here with the most hated count in all of crypto here on Bitcoin. So we'll dig into this in a second here. But before I do that, just a reminder here that, it's that time of year. Black Friday sale coming up next week for us, which is always the biggest sale of the year that we do. It's one that many people wait for. It's just because the discounts are so good. So that we'll focus on that a bit more on Monday with all the details and the discount codes for those of you that are interested. And one thing to note with those, because we get asked this a lot. So if you were to do a 6-month here, you can get a big discount on that, or even the monthly. It's not like it's just a discount for the first month and then we jack it up after that. That becomes your rate for as long as you stay a member. So it's kind of a nice little kicker that we include there. Okay, so with that said, more details on Monday as well as discount codes here. Now let's just come back here to this. I know nobody likes this count, but technically we can't eliminate it here. And as Bitcoin starts to sell off a bit, now we talked about that. Some of the things that were going on last week here, and as we go to other charts in lower time frame here, I think that this is not terribly surprising. Now, note here I am in log scale. So and this being the Brave New Coin index, as we sit here, here being the prior high, one thing that's not to make a huge deal about this here, but I do kind of harp on this because I don't want you guys to do it. All right, so here we go. Right, so all the breakout traders. Right, here's our prior high. We had one push, nope. One push, second push, nope. Just so breakout traders, a bit of a, I don't know that that's panic yet, but I'm sure they're uncomfortable. Right, you don't want to be a breakout trader. So with that little nugget reinforced yet again, right? I can show it to you all day. How about here, I think I've made that point. ABC, right? Now, if we're coming down here, now this can be counted. What makes this a challenge, right? We're not going to know, right? No one knows. But we're not going to have any sense of which count, because there's probably 5 different ways to count what's going on here. We're not going to have it until we get more information, right? Until we see, where are we headed? Are we going significantly lower here? And significantly lower would be, at this point, anything under 40 would be dramatic. I'm not saying we're going there. I'm just saying that this is a technical pattern we can't eliminate. Now, you could do this a couple of different ways. You could do this as an A, B, and working on a C. We could do it as a WX working on a Y. Well, how are we going to know? Well, of course, we're not going to know. We can't eliminate this count until we get new highs here, and we get to that point where we can eliminate the idea. Because right now, as it sits here, hard to argue with that being a 3. Right? It's hard. Right now, we can get into all the detail here, and I don't know that necessarily makes it better, because there's multiple ways to count that as well. So we're in one of those spots where the Elliott, certainly it's here, but it's inconclusive, so you have to pick a side. Well, I think depending on your time horizon here, this is we're at a spot, as we look at some other charts here in some lower time frames, where I think you have pretty much of a win-win scenario to be looking on the long side. Now, that said, that would all, of course, you'd be stopped out here based on where we're headed here. If we start to unload here, now what would we have there, right? I'm just using the obvious support. If we're coming down here to this level here, closer to 40, well, the market's going to be, upset by that, but at this point here, so could we put the Y here? Well, you could, or it would be unusual. I think at that point you'd be concerned about that rolling over here and then turning into a 5, right? So if we do that, well then you're eliminating the WXY, and now you'd be thinking A, right? So you could use the 5 here. Either of these pivots would work, right? Annoyingly, 5, 3. 5. Right now, of course, the other possibilities, we do it through a series of 3s. We do a triangle, which we've looked at and I've referenced. It seems like the last couple of months, right? Until we get out of here, all of these are still on the table. So that's kind of good news, bad news. See, it's easy to look at that and say, oh, well, what a pain in the ass, right? So why am I trying to implement a strategy that gives me 12 different outcomes? Okay, I hear you on that. I get it. I think we can be a little bit more precise as we go to lower time frames here. Out on the daily, certainly you can't eliminate this. Right? This is not what I think is going to happen, but I'm certainly prepared if it does. Okay, that said, now so let's go over. Where do I want to go? Let's see. Let's go here first. So this is a 4-hour in log scale. Now there's a couple of different things going on here that are really quite interesting for the technician. Okay, premise being we've gone 3-4. Right now, I'm leaving this open to interpretation because we really won't know until we get more reveal from the market here. But just the 3 and the 4, so it's either here or it's here, right? Depending on how you want to count this. It almost doesn't matter because they still get you to a 1. So whether you're doing a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or you're doing this as I've shown it the last couple of weeks as a WXY, and you're going to go 1, 2, 3, well, shit, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Either way, you get to the 1, right? So the interpretation here is more just a preference of what do you feel most comfortable with. I don't think it matters now. So the 4 is one of these 2 pivots. Well, most likely, if this count, unless this count's going to completely collapse, the 4 is in. All right, now there are others. I should note this. Oh shit, where'd it go? Here. There are many very skilled Elliotticians that are counting this as a 1, 2, 1, 2. Right now, while I recognize that that's a possibility here, I think that's less likely that we're going to do such a shallow 2. Now, the premise being that this would be an atypically short third for Bitcoin. Well, but it gets a little stretched because if you'd be saying 1, 2, and this is the current thinking, 1, 2, 1, 2. I think that's a hit on the hopium pipe. Of course it could happen. But as a primary, I think that's overly optimistic here. There's just enough here. We can complete an impulse here, right? What's more likely here? There's the 2 or the 4? Well, it depends where we're going, right? So if we're at 500,000, at the end of next year, we'll probably be back here at thinking 1, 2. But we're not there yet. So I think it's a bit much to put all of that on the market to make that assumption that we've gone 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. It just starts to feel a little bit like, again, you're bogarting the hopium pipe. Okay, so, but note here, there's one thing here that I added to this that just struck me. It was interesting here. I've just connected this trend line here with this pivot here, and I'm just hitting pivot, pivot. This is within ticks. So we get this nice triangle here before we break out. So it's tested, right? This is what you want to see on a breakout and then retested. Now up we go. Now here, because I'm in log scale, I'm using traditional channels here. And again, just pivot to pivot, pivot to pivot to pivot, right? We've little short of tapping the upside here. And as we roll over now, so obvious support area here would be at the prior structure here. Nothing says we have to go there, but it's certainly looking here, you could see a case as how it's underway. Now, with that said, I still, as a primary, prefer the thought that it's 2, 3, and either the 4 is in or the 4 is still yet to come, right? So with that said, let me come back. Where was I? Here. Okay, so what do we do here? Well, okay, so the labeling, this is very open to interpretation here. This would be the more conservative count that we've gone 1, 2, and this, interestingly, I don't see this count coming from many people because nobody would think that this could be the third, right? So the premise is, well, again, regardless of what pivot you use down here, that I got a 1, 2. This is a perfect 50, and we're 2 and through. So in log scale, right? I know everybody's already done this here, but just to review here. So we come to a fit now. It's pardon me. This is. Do I want this log or not log? I want this non-log, pardon me. Okay, so here's the 50. We're up the 2-second target here. So this strong candidate here, and we swing, we come back to all the structure here that we established, this range that we were in. We break it, we test it now. Right. So interestingly here, how this set of median lines here is framing the market pretty nicely here. I think it's equally as good. No, I think Jesus Christ, I thought I had this one marked and that's log. This is out of log. Okay, so hang on one sec. Okay, I'm back. Quick edit. All right, so here now, because this is the non-log version here. So right where we want to see it, right between the 50 and the 618. So very high probability. We've got a nice. Oh, this is a little iffy. Could be well. When I say that, I mean this could be counted multiple ways. But the 3 into the pocket here. Hard to think anything other than 1, 2, right? Oh, well, pardon me. It's either 1, 2 or AB, right? So this is right where you're looking for it, and what comes off of it, right? We get an impulse comes off of it. Now, here's where this gets interesting, right? So this is very open to interpretation, and we're just not going to know. So all you can do is make an educated guess here. Well, so as I was saying before, the beautiful framing of the geometry here via this set of median lines, right? So here from the corner, well, obviously our 80% is it's almost a straight line, right? We go right to the median line. Then as is very typical, trading principle number 3, if we're not going to pivot on the median line, we might hover around it as we do before the market decides are we going upper parallel or lower parallel. Right? Pretty self-explanatory. Now, last week, the reason that this looked, and I was kind of trying to encourage you guys to be cautious on the long side, is that while it's tempting, right, to look at this, and there is a count that would get you here, right, to think, oh, okay, right, are we done here? Right, now possibly, right, there is a count that would get you there, but it's poorly shaped, right? So you often hear me talk about having the right look. I mean, you know it when you see it. Now, there's a count we're going to look at here that could get it done here, but it's a bit of a squish, right? So you don't have any overlap, so you have to do it as kind of a squished diagonal, or pardon me, impulse. So we'll look at that in a few minutes. But until we get there, this is just hard to argue with, right? There's 3 here. This looks like an expanded B wave because it's a force fit to get an impulse in there, although it can be done. Now, so what have we done here? Well, so it would appear that we've got all the conditions here for, you could count it a couple of different ways. You could do WXY via the ABC. You could do AB. There is a count here to get this done as a 5. Again, we'll look at it in a second. But either way, right? So the detail, less important than, okay, that's what I've got here. Now, and I've pinged, right, I'm out of log scale, from the pivot low here to the proposed pivot high here. Right, we're not going to take this pivot here because that's not the implied wave 3 per this count. So with that here, so I've got the conditions here. This looks corrective via the structure of it being a 3. We've got the impulse here. We complete an impulse here. Right? We can't ignore that. We complete the impulse here. We correct it with this. Right? This corrects it. So it strikes me that people are quick to assume that couldn't possibly be the 3rd. Well, either it's 3, 4, 5, or it's 1, 2, 3, and we could be putting in the 4 here. Now, the other alternate that seems to be what at least Elliottians that I kind of keep an eye on, is that this is 1, 2, 1, 2, right? And we're starting again. I'm kind of back to where I was before. It feels too... I just wouldn't go there yet. See, I've got a 1, I've got a 2, I've got a 3. Why are we immediately assuming that that's a 2? I'm just thinking, well, I can understand some of the thinking being, okay, if that's the 1 and that's the 2, how far do we go? All right, so here we're certainly long enough to qualify, but it would be atypical for Bitcoin's 3rd to be that shallow. Atypical is just that, atypical. Doesn't mean it's impossible or improbable. Might be, right? So if you're thinking 1, 2, 1, 2, and we're going to pivot here at between the 38 and the 50, it's certainly not unrealistic or atypical of Bitcoin to do that. We've seen it repeatedly. But the Bitcoin twos are often, well, I mean, this one's textbook here. Actually, I mean, we're at the 38. We've got perfect framing. I've got a completed impulse. Why do we not want to put the 4 here? I don't know. I think that's something to keep in mind here. God, it's hard to make a distinction, right? So I have 2 counts that I would call equally valid. Both of them get you long right here. So coming off of the structure. So even if we take the Elliott off of it, all right, so we've had, even if you use this, right, we've had a swing. We've come right back to the prior structure. So whether you're using the market profile, or pardon me, the volume profile, whether you're just pulling this over and saying, well, hey, that looks kind of interesting here. I'm bumping into this where we stalled here before heading down. Now back, right, prior resistance, maybe. Right, was the resistance here, got through, tested from above, right, same thing, right, up we go. Now we're back to testing. Careful about assumptions, right? So if this is the 4 and we're going toward the 5, well, that would mean 3, of course, would be shorter. You can just look at it. Or 3 would be shorter than 1. So we'd have a clear invalidation. Oh, pardon me. Let's get that just right. Get that right here. So 3 is not shorter than 1. So we have all of the conditions out of log for this to be the 3. Now, again, it's atypically short. You'd anticipate it up here. So I think that's why people are leaning into the idea that that's a 1-2. All right, so we have, and we could use targets here, certainly. Now, you're unlikely to be working with an algo here because this would be the dominant right now. Remember, the algo's not going to care. Let me get that out of there. Get it hot here. Not going to care about an expanded B wave. Doesn't care, right? So it's just dominant to dominant here of this set of swings. So now I'm a little closer to the 50. So could that be an algo? That's a pretty good front run. It's bigger than you think. 56, 54, almost a 2K front run. I think that's a bit much. I think that's too far. Typically, you'll see 4, 5, 6, 7 ticks, something like that. Now, obviously, with Bitcoin, likely to be wider than that if it is a front run, but that looks too far. So I think you're more likely playing off of just this structure here. So you just kind of same thing. Just come here, kind of. All right, there we look left. Okay, right, stall here, this consolidation here, which before we get to the low volume node here, which you see I've got noted just via the pivot here. And I've got an alert on that because if it's going to come down and hit that, I want to know. Now, as it sits right here, it would appear that you could do this rather easily, and I think this count is hard to ignore, that we've gone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It gives us our 3rd relative to our 1. Again, just long enough to be a qualifier. Now, A, B, C. This looks like A, B, C into a B, and then C. So we've gone A, B, C into an X. Now, if it's going to hold here as a WXY, we'd need an A, B, C to come out of here. Or you could do it as a WXY. Oh, let's see here. Oh, here, I'm going to take that out. Right. So if we're going to do it this way, you'd have to do it as a 5, 3, 5. Okay. So as an A, B, C to finish down here. Okay. So now I'm on a 4 hour. Let's go to a 1 hour here. Oh, I tried to stay consistent with bringing in as many channels as I could. Per the work we were doing last week, here's a great example, right? A beautiful, beautiful 4 pivot channel. I had that pretty well set. Once that breaks, right, it's just a free fall. So from this pivot, we have to do it up here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, Jesus, this is just a waterfall, right? So, it's whether you want to call it an A. I don't know that it matters terribly here. This from that low, we looked at this last week. We're just shy of the golden zone. First target, second target, 3rd target, right? So it's just shy of 3rd target here. So pretty good rip. All right, so let's think about that. Well, what does that do for us? Come here, over here. Can I finish here? Well, it looks like you could, right? So if that's the Y, and if this is going to be, if this is going to hold as the 4, so we'd have the C completing, the Y completing the proposed 4. Now, I've got another count here we'll look at in a second. Now, this is out of log scale, so because of that, I could use a regression channel. Right? We talked about this last week, how nicely that will frame the market here. So within this channel here, so I get an average price, 2 standard deviations on either side. Now, are we coming out of here? Well, there's a reasonable case here that we've got the 5 we're looking for. We're going to look at that in a second. So what right, if we're coming out of here and it's the 4, well, we need a 1 of the 5. If we're coming out of here and it's the 2, well, we need a 1 of the 3. So where's the downside in being a buyer here? Regardless of how you're counting it here, you've got a solid contender here for this to be a significant pivot. Now, higher time frames, you might interpret this slightly differently. We'll look at that in a sec. But at the moment, I don't see any reason to not be thinking we're done here. Off we go, right? 2, 4. Doesn't matter, right? Either way, the implication is we're going off to challenge the old highs. We're coming into December. There's a seasonal tendency for Bitcoin to rally this time of year. It's technical. Now, of course, what you'd hope to see, if we're just getting started here, you're going to need a 3 to kick. Oh, you can see how it could stall here. You're going to have a big cluster of resistance up here amongst bears. Okay, well, that's now here. And of course, this is an idealized draw, right? You might get it something like that. Well, ideally, you'd get it to test. Oh, there's a little, I had drawn that last week. There's a little structure here where you're thinking, oh, 1, 2, 3, retrace here. We don't want to overlap that, and up we go. And you might bump your head right there. So for the more conservative person here, whether it's 2 or 4, wouldn't matter, right? 1, 2. We've got to have a 1, so we're looking for this. Seems like a reasonable place to be a buyer, right? The count, being wrong on the count is only a function of whether you're wrong here. So you could be a buyer right here, right now, and stop under that pivot. I mean, that's how I would do it. Why? There's no reason to take any additional risk. Either the low is, so you're making that assumption. Okay, I've got a technical pivot, right? If it's in, I've got all the conditions that are necessary here. I'm not to the tick on the fibs, but doesn't need to be. Right? If I've got it, why not take the first retrace, right? Because that's what you're after. 3, 4, 5, right? Low risk, right? Which always, right? It's the name of the game. Let's get in. Let's not take too much risk. So, I've got that. Get it under there. Oh, you might give it a few ticks in case there's one of those liquidation wicks. So what do we got here? Well, that's not quite enough. Back to the median line. Well, even to this structure here, well, there's 4 to 1 right there. 4 to 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, if we complete the 5, well, now you're at a little over 5 to 1. What's not to like there? Well, let's. So with that said, so the idea that it's either a 4 or a 2, I've got the alternate count over here, where we could be done. So if this again, the idea does not matter whether it's the 2 or the 4. You still want to be looking long here. So WX, and we could finish it as a WX right now. Could we have an A, B, C here? Well, the premise would. Well, let me zoom in there. This is a 30-minute. All right, so we're down to the nitty gritty. So here's that nice channel I was talking about before. A, B, C into a W, A, B, C into an X. Now, A, right? So you can probably go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here. A, B. Probably maybe even do a little triangle there. Wouldn't matter, right? So here's the B. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm in log scale here, so because now I've switched over to log scale, so I've got to use a traditional channel. I might do it like that. Okay, so I've got these 2 and I've got these 2. So I've got a potential candidate here for this to be finished. Let's take that up a degree, right? Via this a 5. 3 or a triangle, depending on, it wouldn't matter how you like to count that, and I got a 5. A, B, C gives me the Y. Oh, shit. It's probably got to go up a degree. This has got to go up a degree. One thing I don't like here is that sub looks smaller, so I always do this. Right, minuet. Looks like you've gone up a degree. Okay, so, and that's tied to the fact that I can finish this with a 5. Not too hard to spot it. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, it's a little shaky on the 1, 2, but the 3, 4 here. So you've got the ingredients, and oh, this is log scale, so when I pull it off, it's decent. But more importantly, is what comes off of it. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So let's do the appropriate. All right, so shit that doesn't happen randomly. Oh God, did that overlap? Nope, it didn't. Look at that. Unreal. Right. So now you're gonna. This is on Coinbase. You're gonna have to check that. 1, 2. Here's the 5. Here's the C. Let's pull back out here. Log scale, so you've got to use a regular channel. Same thing, right? I might do it like that. Okay, so it's not atypical in a channel for the 5 to not reach the upper side of the channel and to pivot around the median line. So extension in the 5th. Oh, it's probably, if this, depending on how far this comes down, this leads me to think I've got an impulse here, but you could see the potential for this to turn into a diag, because if it's A, B, C, right, and we're doing that, then oh shit, this would have to be sort of an A, B, C like this. Now, do I have A, B, C going again? So it remains to be seen. But right now, because of that, that is just tick perfect. Because of that, I'd lean into the impulse. So meaning, again, wouldn't matter, 2 or 4. If we're done here, if I've got an impulse here and I'm going to come down, now I'm just flirting with the edge of that channel here. If I'm going to come down into this lower zone, right in here, and I can get it in a 3, right? If you weren't off of this, right? So here was the first one. Well, here's your chance to go again. Here was the one that I try to teach you guys all the time. Now, assumes you're watching the market when this was happening. This is a 30-minute. Oh, I'm not sure. It could be. Maybe. Oh, well, let's see. First retrace. Right. So talk about low risk, right? Your stop's right there. And if you're watching that, right, you had to have the middle of the night for me, right? So if you were in a time zone where you could be on that, not bad. I come to think of it. What do we get here? I'm just looking for the algo engagement here. So 1 through 3, there's the perfect 50 as it hits that 1, right? So the algos, they got their pay. Curious how the 2. Right. So we've got, no, that's interesting. So we've got a tap of the golden zone up just shy. Now that is close enough to be, since I'm down now to a 30-minute, to be a front run on second target. But you can just, obviously they got paid, right? They got that right there. That's what they're after. So as we finish here, so a very technical low, right? Looks good. This is what I mean by this is a bit squishy here, right? So it's kind of hard to dig a 5 out of there. So you're gonna have to do a 1, 2. Oh shit, I could go down to the 5-minute. You're going to have to do a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, there's probably other ways you could finish it here, but looks like, well, so if you're changing it to an ABC, then you're just going into a WXY. You can get it done either way here. All right, so here this is the most telling retrace we're going to look at. Right, what happens? Right, first assume we make the retrace, because if you put this in context. Look what we just did, right? So here was our base of support down here, right? This area. Oh, shit. Here, let me pull out so you can see it. Right? We're just using this structure here, the wave 1, proposed wave 1 pivot, and then this little structure here this was our pivot. We tested it. Now we've gone through. We're coming back into test now if we can come out of here. So now as I come back to this, here's from above. Now are we going to test? We test the edge. We're going to test a little deeper. Let's go back to that 30-minute. Boy, that's interesting. So then, of course, right now so I'm in log scale, so I'm going to use set of median lines here, so I can do something like that. So candidate here, candidate for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, got to put them somewhere. Let's take them up a degree. Oh, let's go green. 1, 2. And now we're waiting for that 2. Now, you'll note here, one of the reasons that I did this, I wanted you to see that. That was initially I drew that as part of a channel, and you see the test from after breaking the test from above, right? That's just what you'd hope. Oh shit, wrong one. What you'd hope to see here. So same thing. I'm drawing this channel off of these 2 pivots and these 2 pivots. If it comes down here and I get that intersection, now I'm all the more interested. And of course, that's going to be technical tied to this. If I get that right on it. Right now, there's your golden corner. Well, do you see what that would give you? You see the trend line here, based off of the channel that potentially now encompasses this finishing 5. Boy, that's a. I don't. How do you not buy that? Right, if we get it, right? None that says we're definitely getting it, but if we get that, oh my God, you have to buy that. Right, the risk reward. So here's what we'd be after for the 3. So what's your risk reward there? If heavy emphasis if offered. All right, so that would pretty much do it right there. So bigger upside. So you're going 1, 2, 3. So that's a little over 3 to 1. Now you don't necessarily need to give it all of that room here. You can use 7, 8, 6. If that's too much for you, I mean something like that, not bad. You might use the wave 1 here, if you're down here. I mean, you could do this at the 7, 8, 6, right? Something like that. Now you're up to 7 to 1. You don't have to give it that much room, right? It's just a risk tolerance, personal preference, the size that you're trading. If you're going to put on the trade with this as the pivot, well, you got to reduce your size. So now we know it. So this would be the 1, 6, 1, 8. So if we get off of here and you get the reaction you'd anticipate, I'd be very well. There's going to be a reaction. Doesn't mean it holds, but you're going to need that to get there. So if you take a little bit less here because you want to give that more room on the next retrace, because it will come, on the next retrace, this might be a chance to add. Now, you're adding. Now, you've already got this profit. Now, you've given back a little bit here, but certainly you could start to reduce the risk at that point. Because if you had this reaction off of the pivot here, you'd be making the assumption that this is a hard pivot, right? And it's not going to be threatened. Well, shit, I mean, it might come down. They threaten it, but it's not going to break. So the 65 here is going to hold it. Now, again, I don't have this, right? We're not there yet. But that would be a way to approach this without having to take more risk than you're comfortable with. Oh, well, that's kind of that would sting, right? 56 to below 53. And if you're levered, right, that's going to sting, right? So you might go into the first nugget right there, right, just below the 786, right? Something will have changed if we're going that deep. But again, we don't have the length of the A. We don't have anything to work with here, other than the fact I've got a candidate here for a pivot. We come into that, a piece here, get a 5, right? Just like we got this 5, get another 5 here, a little retrace. You could see how it would make sense, right, to come back here and test that, right, this structure, if we get up and then come back, right? So there's a roadmap for you. So piece here, add here. Shit, you could add here. How aggressive do you want to be? Right. So I think there's almost no bearish count here that would have you looking to be pushing for more for new lows here. Doesn't mean you can't get stopped out here, right? Of course, right? I mean, I would never say that, right? But there are no guaranteed winners, but this is a high probability trading event that if you didn't get this, and now we sit and we wait. Now, if you want to be a little more aggressive, I mean, you can go on the short side here, but do you really want to do that, right? So you're right at the support, the longer term support. Now, granted, we've gone through it. You want to be selling right into that? Ideally, right, you're anticipating a B. You can have an expanded B. I'd be patiently waiting here if you're not already long. Now, I am down on a 30-minute here. So if I take this, let's get out of here, right, as we were looking at it before. So even if you go to an hourly, Oh, right, some obvious things, right? So we're stopping here, right? We hit our heads right here. Why? Right, it's just price action, right? We got a low volume node here. So we've come up, we're running into likely shorts that caught this. We'll defend here. Now that might push it down. So remember I talk about this a lot. If it starts coming down here, you absolutely can be certain that bears are after the stops that are at that pivot, right? Whether they want to run those stops and then take it up, which is very common. Either way, they're after them, right? So the fact that it can't get there, if they get rejected here and algo steps in, which there'll be a reaction. Now, if there's news driving it or whale dump, so there's all sorts of things could drive it lower. But if you get here and you get the reaction, boy, that's one you would want to pay attention to. Now, we're not there yet. But here, given that this is exactly what you wanted to see. Okay, I've got a candidate here for a pivot. Do I get a 5 off of here? Yep, I do. Right now, you're sitting quietly, waiting. Right? Don't FOMO into it. Let it come down. Now here you've got the same issue. You want to buy at the 50? You want to buy the golden zone? Right? Maybe you split it between the two. 40, 60, 60, 40, whatever you're most comfortable with, because you've got clear invalidation points, right? If this is the hard pivot, it's game on. Before we, so I think that covers the two scenarios here. Well, let me come back over here. Well, here, I guess I'll wrap with this here. 36, I'm going fairly decent here. I'm bringing over Motive Wave, right? You guys know I'm a big fan of Motive Wave. Any of you guys interested in using Motive Wave? Our link below, in the link tree below this video, would get you access to, yeah, we get a little kicker from it, right? I wouldn't recommend it if I didn't. I wish I've only been using it for 12 years. Great product, right? And they update it constantly. So, oh, let's get this off of here. This is a safe recommendation for me to make to any of you that are interested in this kind of thing. Well, if you look at this, if I highlight this here, this is the alternate that we have to consider here. So if it's 1, 2, there is a way to finish this here. Now, I told you it was a bit of a squish. Let me go down to a 30-minute here and show you what I mean by that. So do we have the right look here? Well, right off the bat, you've got this liquidation wick. So getting this to be a decent 1, you pretty much have to ignore it. No, per this count, you're having to do it this way to get an A, B, C here for that to hold as your 4. Get on there before it goes up for the 5. Now, is that a 1? Boy, that's a stretch. I mean, you can get it from here. So it's actually, it plays better if you do it here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Maybe you can get that done, but it still looks like a 3. So I think this is a bit of a force fit, which is why I'm coming here last. Could you go 1, 2, put the 2 here, 3, 4, 5? Well, it's not much of a finish. It's squishy, right? And then you put a channel on it. You see how 1 and 2 are disconnected here, which I will often tell you, you want to see these connected if you can't, right? So 1 and 2 are just off by themselves, and I'm finishing over here. Makes me think it's much more likely an A, B, C. Now here, if that were the case, we're coming down here. This is the more bearish. Let me go back to the 3-hour here. So if that were the case, now we could, if this is the 1, right, and we're in the 2 right now. If it's, well, here, let me highlight this so you can see. If it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we're coming down for the 2, well, this is right where we're looking for. Here's the 50 in the golden zone, coming back into this prior structure down here. So if I highlight the second wave, you can see that, boy, wouldn't that be nice? So we'd be looking at it like this. So the move down, this oh shit, let me go to a 1 hour. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Remember, we can finish that last 5 down here. If I can get that 5 in, well, what have I done, right? So that's likely the A, right? Now we're looking for the B. So that's why I was saying before, whether this ends up being an A, B, C, and we're going to go lower, all right? And we are ultimately going to call this the larger degree 1, and we're heading for the 2. Well, you'd be longing here going into the B. So certainly there's the potential here you might make some money and then give it back. Well, at worst case here, I'd like to think if you caught the B, if you caught this move, and you could see how it might bump into some resistance here and roll over. If you caught this, I'd like to think you'd move your stop at the very least to break even, if not to lock in some profit along the way. Individual choice, right? It's just about how you want to approach money management. But if we're coming down here to this zone here for an ABC, well, you'd have a single here. So your worst case here would be you go up here, you hit the B, and you come back down, you scratch. I'd like to think perhaps, you know, there's a pivot that comes in here. You'd be trailing a stop behind that pivot because you're not, because that's such a real threat with this here. I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to put the channel on this because you've got this nice impulse. Now it's the same kind of thing. Look how 2, 3, and 4 are all connected, and 1, 2 is a little disconnected. It makes me think it's A, B, C. But since it's here, I can do it. I can get it done. A, B. Now we're coming down for the C. So it's kind of a high-class problem. Again, right, so you could go in and get stopped out right away. We go in, ride the B up here to 65. Now, if you bought it on the first retrace here at 57 and took it to 65, I don't think you'd be disappointed. But if it rolls over as it starts coming down, now here, do you know what's coming? Well, if this is A, B, C, because you could do it that way, and you're thinking 1, 2, right, it would be a question of what do we get here? Right? Do we get a 3 or a 5? Right? See, that's how Elliott will guide you. That's the benefit. Now you hear me a lot say, "Well, this could be that, might be," but it depends what comes next. It's always context. What came last? What comes next? Where does it fit? How does it fit? Can it fit? See, I think this cannot fit. Well, pardon me. Shouldn't say it that way. I think this would be in a really unusual fit to finish this like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the first problem is the 1. You almost can't. It's so hideous. You can't do it, right? If this is, what are you going to do? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It just gets to be unrealistic. So while Motive Wave's algorithms here can finish it for you, this is why you don't want to rely on the internal pattern engine that's in Motive Wave. This is infinitely more valuable to you if you're a skilled Elliottian, right? Then it just becomes something that saves time. If you're using it to say, oh, I don't know, right? Is that, oh, I guess I got an impulse there. I think that you're going to have more trouble than someone who's studied Elliott Wave, perhaps been through our belt system. Then when you come here, oh, this is a joy to work with. Right? It just saves you time, right? It's the bottom line. It's an efficiency enhancer. Oh, let's see here. Did I have one more over here? I think this is the bearish count, where we'd be still heading potentially into a triangle. Oh God, I had these. Oh, here's the 1, 2, 1, 2 thinking. All right, so already I think this is problematic. Shit, it wouldn't matter, right? So can I get it done? Yeah. Can I get an impulse in there? Yeah, I can get that done. Now the 2 is unusually shallow here. Unusually. I mean, we don't even make the 23. So if it's rip up into a 1, that's my 2. Well, you see Bitcoin again being problematic, where it's not easy to spot the 2. Well, so if it's you could go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Either way, you get to a 1 here. There's the 3 into the 2. Well, if it's 1 and I'm going to go A, B, C into the 2 via the expanded B wave here. Right, same idea. Well, I've got that little 5 to start out with. So if it's 1, 2, 1, 2, nothing but blue sky above. There's very little downside to taking the long there, other than the very real possibility that you buy it on a retrace, you get stopped out, right? But welcome to trading. That's just the reality, right? You can't ignore stops. You have to embrace them, right? Now the point is, how much I'm going to lose if I'm wrong? How much I'm going to make if I'm right? 1, 2. If we start thinking of, oh shit, we start thinking about where that upside is, where are we looking for that 3? Oh, here I can do it this way, right? We're going up that high for a come here for a 3, 4, 5. All of this has to go. All of this goes up. All of this goes up. This goes up. Right, with that, where are we here? Right, 150. That, where are we after our high probability zone? Let's bring it down. Let's use the 1618. 120, 130K. Just doing that. 2. So, and this is a count that I see a lot of people leaning into. 1, 2, 1, 2. It's certainly on my list of alternates. I think I got everybody covered. There's the bearish. That was me fucking around with it. This we just looked at, right? So if it's A, B coming down for the C, and then this one we were just looking at before in terms of this is what's open to interpretation. So if it's just to kind of finish up here a little bit of a kind of an example here. If this is going to hold as the 4, right? Or if this is the 4 over here, right? Now, and I just were to take motive wave and say, is there an impulse here? If I start from this low, do I have an impulse right into that high? Well, it'll find one. So this is technically valid now. But look at the shape of that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Does that look right? And again, look how. Well, here now, if I go, let's decompose the impulse that's in that third wave. Do I have one? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I do. But look how 3, 4, and 5 are so disconnected from 1, 2. I don't want to see that. I want to see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if I say, I don't like that motive wave, and I want to draw it myself, so I might do it this way and say, okay, well, I don't like that. So let's go 1, 2, how about 3, 4, 5. Oh, get off of there. I got to get this back. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, okay. Is that any better? Is it really? Well, let's get the 1 and the 2 highlighted. So if I'm coming down here, this would be a tell. Long way. So, all right. So this would be abnormally short for a 3, right? So is Bitcoin going to do an extension of the 1, 50 at the 2, and a shallow 3? And I think that's why people are thinking 1, 2, 1, 2. Well, there's the. Oh, here what I want the 4 to the 3. Now, a couple of things that I spotted here that were kind of interesting. If I've got them, I don't know if we need to go there, but so we're right at a 38 here. Now I'm in semi-log, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4 up for the 5, right? Why not? Well, that's going to put it way over there, but right. So what would we be done there? So you see, the reason I think that's worth considering, right? So as a solid candidate. Oh, let's get it over here. If we're going, I gotta pull this back up. All right, let's get you out of there. If it's 3, 4, and we're going up for the 5, okay, so we have a clear invalidation point right here, because at that point, since we know 1 is longer than 3, at this point we know we'd have invalidation. We couldn't count it this way because at this little bar here that I drew, 5 would be longer than 3. 3 can never be the shortest, so we have an invalidation point. It's going to be hard to eliminate this count until we get up here. Now that's at 86K, right? Which seems, right, if Bitcoin's going to hold to its seasonal tendency, seems very reasonable that we could get that high. Now, we have only have to go 1 tick through it, right, to invalidate this count. Now you're back here and you're pretty certain that it's 1, 2, 1, 2. But until we get there, well, so my point, the reason I was trying to wrap up here is that let's draw this out. If we're just starting here, and well, let's just say we go get the 5 there. Oh, I might have to do this on a higher time frame. Okay, so we get the 5 and we do not go longer. Right now, this is log scale, so I want that to be out of log. But if I take this out of log, this is going to look screwy. But so I measured this in arithmetic because longer is longer, right? I'm not going to use log scale to invalidate. I'm going to use is it longer or not. At this point, it would be right up to it. Okay, so if that's see, this is why I think people are, it's overly, you don't need to be that bullish, right? So if we were to finish the 1 here on the assumption that that's the 4, and we're going to come down into some of this heavier structure, and then we go 3. Oh, shit. Let's go to a 12. All right, so think about that. Okay, then 5 would be going way, way, way up here, right? So now we're getting well, there's 350K. So, oh, here, let's use the actual real numbers. And I'll wrap up here. So, this is not bad news. If we finish the 5 up here, if it's as I've drawn it here, if it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? We get that done. Okay, now let's just for the sake of mapping it out, say that we do that. Now, if I get right here, I'm just going to use it on the assumption that we don't quite get there. So that would make my ideal buy zone right here, kind of tying back into all this consolidation that we did here. There's a nice high volume node to it. So if we come down here into a 3, this is not bad news, right? If we come into this, well, let's use real numbers. Okay, let's get that out of here. Let's get that out of here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What would that be? This would be a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's go real big. Oh, here, what do I not use? I'll put them in blue. Okay, if that were the 1 and this were the 2, I don't know why we have to be thinking so crazy, insane bullish, right? To remind people, I'm as bullish as any. But here, let's not hit the hopium pipe too hard. Okay, so here would be just a traditional 3. Now, we're going to get a traditional 3 from Bitcoin. Who knows, right? That's 300K. Now, log scale, 3, 4, 5, right? So we'd be finishing the 5 of the 5 of the 5. So, Jesus, this has to actually go up. Right, we'd be finishing that 5 around 500,000. So, and I take you through that because I've been back and forth with this, going, why do I want this to be 1, 2, 1, 2? Well, I mean, either way, right? The implication is we're going well, towards 100. But back that out for a second and think about what you're actually saying there. If you're leaning into the 1, 2. All right, let's just think about that. So all of this would have to go way the hell up here. All of this is we're getting a little crazy. So we're going 1, 2, right? So that has to find its third up here. But then in the midst of that, we'd be doing yet another 1, 2, which also has to find its third. So it by necessity, it's really implying that there's going to be a monster extension wave here. Now, of course, Bitcoin's prone to doing that in the thirds, but I think either way, these are really high-class problems to have. Whether it's 1, 2, 1, 2, or 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're going towards the 5. I think it's unnecessary to assume that the third is not in. It's atypical, right? But you're getting atypical on both sides. It's atypical that the third would be that short, but also that the 2 would be that shallow. If it's 1, 2, 1, 2, so you're kind of left in this. Hard to be absolutely definitive about it. But as a bull, you're certainly at a place where you've got a reasonable location to be entering the market. Whether it's into the A's in, you're going into a B, 2's in, you're going into the 1 of the 3, or 3's in and you're going into the 1 of the 4. There's almost no scenario here that's not bullish other than where we started here and that we're heading down, right? This is the bear count, which you'd have to be paying attention to that, right? Now we're hitting down, something dramatic has happened here. Then, right, it still would imply much, much higher prices, right? 5 is still way the hell up here, over 200K. There's almost no bad news, right? So for a long-term hodler, you don't really care, right? I mean, if you got down here, you'd be buying with both hands. If you're just playing this little retrace here, well, yeah, all right, so you'd be deeply underwater. I'd like to think you wouldn't ride a trade that you're putting on here at 57 down to 33. Maybe you would. Depends where you're long from. If you were one of the breakout traders there, you're going to ride it that far down? Well, maybe, right? You never know, right? Hodlers, right? It just depends. Did you use leverage? Even still, even if you just were a cash buyer, you didn't use leverage and you wrote it down here, you're uncomfortable as hell. But I'd like to think it wouldn't be enough to have you be thinking that it's doing that. Right now, again, anything's possible, but I think that's the least likely of all the scenarios here. If anything, if we're going to stay with this bearish count, if anything, oh shit, where am I? We'd just be picking up the 4 over here rather than over here. Almost no negative scenario here over the next year to 3 years. It's just where are you getting the most strategic entry point? That's really all we're trying to do here. And part of the reason I've suggested through this whole thing, right, this whole move up here, it just has not looked quite right. And even still sitting here, right, this still is very hard not to interpret that as a 3. Careful, right? So as always, you've got to pay attention to Bitcoin on a very regular basis. What did it do last, right? What are we doing right now? Right now, as we go back into this, we've got all the conditions necessary. Shit, here, let's go back to that hourly. I've got a nice little pop off of a 5, right? And it was technical. So we retrace a little bit on that. Boom. But don't be reckless, right? Don't, well, who needs to stop? Who needs to stop? Who needs to stop? Okay, guys, have a good weekend. Reminder, live streams have been those have been pretty successful, so we're going to continue to do those. We have opened it up, so it's any asset class, anytime we're doing it. We will, again, remind you of that Black Friday deal on Monday and Tuesday, and next 2 times we live stream. So for the rest of you guys, have a good weekend. I hope you got a little something out of this. I think you could be nibbling here. All right, guys, have a good weekend. We'll talk to you on Monday.